I had in mind a kind of revolutionary line of almost, I shouldn't call it logic, but there is no other term. You'll see what I mean. I was going to link up perhaps some boxcars that you would not ordinarily find not only not on the same track, but probably not on the same planet. But let's see. First off, I'm going to play at least A, B, C, and maybe D, and see if you can see how that they are linked together in a way. And the train doesn't just go in one direction. And it's not that I'm going to ask them as questions. I stay at least 8 seconds ahead, since you laughed at that. My plan is now I'll ask them sort of as questions. But I may change it now that I'm 8 seconds ahead of even... Maybe I'll make them as statements. We'll see. But there are going to be at least 3, but one does not necessarily lead to the other. That is, cause the other. But when you put it in a sentence, you got to go from the subject into the predicate somewhere, right? But in this kind of track, it may turn upon itself. Because you got to remember this. Look at it this way. If that was too vague, there would not be a roundhouse if it were not for the railroad tracks, right? You didn't like that? All right, there wouldn't be railroad tracks were it not for trains. Okay? But if they didn't have railroad tracks, who in the world would build an engine? Right? Try and keep that in mind. First off, A, without talking to yourself, there could be no thinking. Since I didn't give a preface other than saying I would do a little more from the other night, I'm still trying to keep some of you a bit interested in what might be the basis and what might be the purposes of human thinking. Now, it may appear, you can think about talking to others for a second, but you do understand this, don't you? Think about it a second. You could not talk to other people unless you had talked to yourself first. Now, don't worry just about that historically and trying to think back or try to figure out from your rough knowledge of the human and life structure now whether that was true from the very beginning when you first spoke. It was. But look at right now. If you did not talk to yourself, you could not in any manner talk to anyone else. Now, if you could not talk to yourself, if men did not talk to themselves, there would be no thinking. You could not think if you did not talk to yourself. B, for the better part. If there were no thinking, there would be no time. Now, put that way, I bet a lot of you think I may have said that before, but if you listen in a minute, a whole bunch of minutes, I'm talking about something else. But consider for at least a second or so the importance that life has made human thinking place upon time. Would you be surprised? I couldn't resist one time. I looked in several books. Famous quotations, these nice big old fat books. And look back in the index. I found the kind that list them under subject matter. And in my wily way, I guessed correctly. The largest sector was under love. But you know what was second? Which I also guessed before I looked. Now, I'd admit, it was a running battle between, if this was a Western book now, It was a running battle between God and time. But other stuff, wealth, health, family, friends, God was the only thing close to second place with time. Think about that a second. Not just these kind of discussions at times, and these kind of maps at times that you may think that I stretch to some almost metaphysical point, if not metaphorical point. I'm trying to remember what I said about these are not ABC pushing each other in some direction, because we got to turn around and go the other way in a minute. Without thinking, there would be no time. None. That's not as obvious as some of you may think from listening to me all these months or years. Let me slip in C. Now, this is where the train begins to run not only forwards and backwards, but you got to understand that it runs off at right angles to itself. The track does. There would be no plans. Let me run it sideways first. Were it not for plans, there would be no need for time. Now do I have to put in a C.5 for you and say, without thinking, there could be no plans? For those of you who liked night before last, I will hint to you strongly that I'm back into the same area. Back right at the same area. That were it not for the need for planning, there would be no time. Consider actions that just at the 3D observable level that humans have with other creatures on this planet. With your dog, your cat, your possum, your hippo if you have the room. At one level, there are no plans. When it gets down to the runnings, like if you just don't, autonomic nervous system, all of your inner workings require, now you cannot even tolerate, planning. That you have in common, and it's not an invalid comparison between other creatures. You do not plan to have your heart beat. You do not plan to digest the food that you consume. That would seem obvious enough, I guess. On that level, if that's all there was to you, there would be no need for time. None. It would not exist. What you know as time. You could not conjure it up if you could still think in the way that you call thinking now. There is no way that you could imagine it any more than you can really imagine a five-dimensional reality. If what you did, what you were required to do simply happened, that it required no plans, there would be no need for time. Because what we are now referring to is a lag. There is room, but it is no longer spatial. But there is room between a man saying, I will do so-and-so, a plan, and when the plan is to be executed. 2 minutes from now, a month from now. If man was not required to plan, I'm not going to make this, I'm not going up there and draw the ABCD train real plain for you, and I've already done a little of it verbally, but I'm talking about the same thing. It's going this way, that way, and back and forth. If you didn't talk to yourself, you couldn't think. If you couldn't think, you couldn't plan. There would be no time. Literally, there would be no time, by any definition that any human has ever called it, from a scientist, a physicist, a philosopher, you. Time would not exist were it not for the need for man to plan. What would be the need for time? What happened, happened. What need does your heart, consider your heart, consider it a living, which in a sense you can, a living separate entity. If you get down to a cellular level enough, you could look at every organ, every cell in your body as being another entity. The heart has no, if it could even think, would have no conception of time because it has no plans. If it had any plans, it would run amok. If your heart, if you're a good individual, had any plans, you would sorely regret it in the short time left to you, in the short, painful time that you would have left to you if your heart had any plan. I don't care what plan. Don't tell me now what kind of plan, that it wants to grow up and be a priest, or it wants to move to Oregon, or it wants to work less. It doesn't matter. If it had any plan, you'd be done for. It has no plan. A dog has no plan. None. None. What it does, it does. I have, in other ways, if you recall, and one or two of you at the time, I could see that you thought you saw something. When I pointed out, I used dogs. You could use chimpanzees, anything. But I was trying to show you that animals, even of the higher primates, have no conception of time. And I talked about it in other ways, but every time I've done this at all, I would see the few of you, and I tried to encourage you that there is something of interest there. There's something that you could use. Because even your own intelligence would tell you otherwise, or many people, that their dog recognizes time. It does not. If you do not think in the human sense, if you cannot think about thinking, if you cannot think about the relationship between your apparent actions and your apparent thoughts, then you are not thinking. And if you cannot think, there is no sense of time. If you've got no plans, if you are not wired up to have plans, there is no sense of time. Nobody could teach you time, no matter what you do to a dog or chimpanzee. There is no time. Now, it's easy enough to mistake spatial reality. It's easy enough to mistake the tempo of life itself at the cellular level of a dog at the same time every day walking over to his bowl. But he has no sense of time because there is no plan. It is simply that time, as far as you call it, for him to eat. And he walks to the bowl. Or he walks to you. Or he barks. Or he does whatever he does. But he had no plan. There was not a 2-hour plan. If I got to go through this right quick. He did not begin to look at the clock, or he did not begin to check his own cellular tempo and think, well, how close are we to feeding time? All right, you might say, well, I know that. There was no 2-minute plan. Some of you might go, well, all right. There was no 2-second plan. Suddenly, his cells, the dog in toto, wanted to eat. That's it. No plan. No plan, no time. All right, how about, look at here. Or how about nota bene? Take note, all of you Italians. How about a C and a half? All right, a D. No time, no fear. No time, no nightmares. No time, no unfulfilled dreams. No time, no regrets. Not possible biologically. try your best to short circuit, listen to your own noises about psychological aspects of this. Biologically impossible. Sense of time comes from the brain itself, just from the nervous system. No sense of time, there would be no non-animal fears. Now you'd still have fear if you're staying on the top. If you had no sense of time and you were on the edge of a cliff and you leaned over too far, somebody began to push you a little too far, we'll call that animal fear. Everybody understands that. No time, no non-animal, no non-verbal fear. There would be none. Think about it a second. I'm just telling you quite simply. I'm telling you quite simply the kinds of things that you can't quite simply say, but the words are correct. Without any time, there would be no non-animal fear in anyone. With no time, there would be no nightmares. There'd be no unfulfilled dreams. Think about that. There would be no regrets. I mean, all of you who may have smiled and went, consider this. If all that was true, what would be left? What would you be from an ordinary definition of a human if you had no fears, no unfulfilled dreams, no regrets, no nightmares? And I could name a few other things, but what would you be? Would you perhaps be a movable, living definition of beige? Now, I'm not speaking metaphysically in some way now, or that would obviously be a great superior person. That would almost be Buddha's definition. Just take it the way I'm putting it. If you had none of that, and you were still a functioning human being in the city, what kind of human being would you be? My hint was that from one verbal description, you would be the world's most bland, most boring. You might be almost brain dead. Almost brain dead at the 3D level. And yet when I describe it, at first it sounded like, well, that would be beneficial. If I had no dreams, unfulfilled dreams, no fears, no non-animal fears, phobias, worrying what people thought, no human fears, no non-physical fears. If I were free of those, I had no unfulfilled dreams, I had no nightmares, I had no unfulfilled dreams, plus I wasn't worried about what the future may bring. I'm not dreaming of bad possibilities, and I got no regrets. That is, the past is no longer haunts me. Now, it sounds like the very kinds of things that I've been talking about or hinting about all these years that you dreamed about, that, yeah, that'd be great. But if all that was wiped out, which would be if there were no time, and now we're looking at time, remember, not as something external to you, since there is nothing anyway, but we're not describing it as some so-called objective reality, nor am I simply describing it as a subjective reality of people having a sense of time that, well, today was a slow day because I was bored, I didn't feel good, and so the day just drug on. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that time you cannot look at as a noun at all, in any sense, no matter if it was used such in your thinking in any particular sentence or any idea. It is a non-describable, it is simply a manifestation of thinking. Remember, I am not saying that one causes the other. That's the way the sentences begin to sound. I am saying that if you've got thinking, you've got time. Anybody who thinks has a sensation of time if they had never heard the term, if they'd never seen a clock. They know time, because if they can think, they make plans. And if you make plans, there's time. Because you make a plan. You could be the most uneducated, unsophisticated creature extant on this planet right now, living off in solitude, and in some way you could think. You could make plans. If you thought you'd make plans, you got no choice. You'd make plans, and if you made plans, if you'd never heard the word time, never seen a clock, you would still be in time. You would know what time was, because there you would sit and you would look up, and whatever, I'll just make up any kind of scenario, but anything that you would look up and realize, well, when you see trees bent like that, that means such and such animal has been swinging through them, and that's the kind of animal I like to eat. Now what I'll do is I'll follow these trees and I'll find the animal. Now, he doesn't have a watch. He never heard about time, and so you don't know, all right, it might take me. I can't stand here and decide, well, what if I follow it and it takes 3 hours? Can I wait that long to eat? You don't think that way. If you've never heard of time, you never heard the word hours or minutes, but you now know time. Because if you did not know time, a plan would not exist. You would then be a dog. You would be a chimpanzee. There's no way to plan to go do this. It just is dead. It just is done. You're just there, and it's done, and you're part of it. You could have no sensation that I did it. Because to do that, you would have had to be able to think beforehand and had a plan to do it. A dog does not chase a squirrel and go, ha-ha, I did it. I don't mean just overtly. Trust me. A chimpanzee does not do something and go, aha, I did that. That would require a sensation of time. If any of you have any difficulty, it would require the sensation of the lowest level of time. They would have to have some sensation that there is some gap between me intending to do something and to do it. And to be aware of it. To be able to talk about it to themselves. I did it. I accomplished it. To do that, for any creature to have a feeling, to say to itself, when I say feeling, I'm referring to being able to think about it, that I did so-and-so required that there would be a plan. I intended to do that. I did it. I succeeded. If you cannot think, you cannot plan. If you cannot plan, there is no time. And if there is no time, I'll repeat D for you again. No time, no fears. No non-animal fears. No time, no nightmares. No time, no unfulfilled dreams. Think about that one. It didn't say that it would fulfill all your dreams. But if there was no time, you would have no unfulfilled dreams. Because you got to have time to have an unfulfilled dream. There has to be time, not just as I described with the chimpanzee. A dog would have to have a sensation of time to say, all right, I intended to do that and I succeeded. An unfulfilled dream is, all right, I intended to chase that squirrel and catch it, and I didn't. Rats. I don't know what dogs would say, but rats. Cats. Without time, no unfulfilled dream, and without time, no regrets. Because there would be no sensation. A dog, a chimpanzee would not later, 2 seconds later, 2 minutes later, 2 days later go, I don't know what's happening. I can't catch squirrels like I used to. And I feel bad about it. Am I getting old? Am I overweight? No regrets. Could I push you a little bit further and put it to you this way? I will go ahead and give you a question. Could it be possibly, I guess make this D.3 or D.75? I'm not sure, but put down both. That men are born and wired up to think. And by thinking, you plan. And by planning, you have time. And by having time, you have all the things that I just pointed out, such as nightmares, non-survival, non-animal fears, unfulfilled dreams, and regrets. Could I ask you to ponder this off on your own? Could it be that man is wired up, that life is wired up through man in such a way that he is born in the midst of plans to suffer the areas I just pointed out. And by suffer, I mean in the widest possible sense. That is, that nightmares, unfulfilled dreams, regrets, fears are going to be continually executed through him in a particular place. The place that thinks, the place that plans, the place that knows time. The rest of the body does not know time. Only by reports, only by rumors spoken in another language, I might add. Because no matter what you may know up here about time, that has no effect unless you are doing some useless, which I know you can, but making some useless experimentation about trying to affect that which you should not be fooling with, such as your digestive system. I was going to say, up here you can have all kinds of knowledge about, is it time to eat, or we can't eat now because the lecture's still going on, I'm still here in this seminar, it's still time to work. You can know all of that you want to. But when your stomach gets ready to eat, you can be sitting in the midst of a lecture and your stomach go from here down, no matter what reports they've heard, when it comes time to eat, when your stomach is hungry, it's hungry. It does the hunger. The hunger does it right then, the same way that your heart beats. Your heart does not beat at an apropos time to you. You do not decide when my heart should beat. You do not decide when my bladder should begin to overflow and I have to get up and go to the restroom. It just happens. You may have some control over it, but it does not plan it, and you cannot plan that, all right, although you can cease, or you can stop yourself from having to get up and go to the bathroom for a while. We know that. But you cannot beforehand say, all right, I'm going to be here in this seminar today, and I've been drinking coffee, and so, okay, bladder, don't even bug me for at least 2 hours. Now, that's not going to have any effect. It may fill up, and you have to go, and you may be able to sit there, some of your big boys and girls, and over the potty training age, but you cannot plan, you cannot tell well, you can try. You can say, all right, bladder, we're not going to go for 2 hours. So there's no sense you even notifying me. I mean, you may be on the verge of being full now and all that, but don't even bother to notify me because I am not going to get up and go, and I can hold it for 2 hours, so don't even bother to tell me. Well, you can say that, but now all of you know that that's silly. You may be able to sit there, but when your bladder gets ready to go, you'll know it. Because just instantly it's ready to go. You may be able to stall it, but it had no plan, and you cannot impose a plan upon it. Now back to my D.75 at least. What if all this is tied together in a certain way, which was that very strange sentence, I'll even admit the way I put it. So I misdirected you for a few minutes to let you get over that, but I'm not sure I'm going to improve upon it. What if man is planned to be the conduit, the screen, the playing field for the things that I said were not possible were it not for time? Unfulfilled dreams, regrets, nightmares, non-animal fears. In other words, there's no escaping it. If you think you're going to be a medium for that, if you have a sense of time, you cannot escape that. If you make any plans, you will always suffer, in the widest sense of the word, whether it seems to be negative or not, you will suffer unfulfilled dreams, nightmares, regrets, non-animal fears. Do we have the train now sort of in a semicircle to ward off the attackers? Except the train is the attackers. Might I ask you this from the other night? Could anybody possibly see any connection between this and the apparent internal reality of a partnership? Would anybody even try, from my hints night before last, consider how all of what I've talked about thus far tonight, and my bringing up the partnership again, to tie that to additional questions, what might be the actual purposes of thinking, and what might actually be, assuming they could be known, which I almost told you outright not before last that they can be, what might be the actual basis, the simple, straightforward basis of human thinking, which of course gets translated into personality, consciousness. Of late I've been, I guess some of you should have noticed, I've been differentiating at times when I would use in a sentence consciousness, which oftentimes I would do simply to have a synonym to keep from saying the same thing over and over, but I have pointed out, at least in my omissions, that really what people say about consciousness in the city is not really intelligence. And so I've just been sticking with intelligence, even if it runs the risk of having the sentence repeat the word over and over instead of throwing in consciousness and awareness. But as long as I brought this up, do you know what consciousness really is? Connotatively, the way it's used in the city, of course, which is where all language seems to arise, consciousness is simply intelligence talking about itself favorably. I was going to say think about it, but some of you hit you already. People in the city, they can be educated, they can just be rather routine, but when people are really sort of laying it on about themselves, they may be talking about humanity, but of course they're laying it on about themselves, they like to speak of the consciousness. I mean, it sounds like something else rather than how the brain works. You know, the brain cells and the brain activity. Well, no, I'm not talking about just that. I'm talking about, oh, I don't know, the realm of human consciousness. Hey, you're talking about the workings of the brain. No. That's the kind of man who would not do well at an autopsy. I mean, he might not faint, but he'll refuse to see what's right before his eyes. Well, speaking of trains, and speaking of me trying to put some things in certain relationships, at least by hinting and asking, what if I suggested to you that time, have I mixed all this up? Do we have a nice melange? Consider thinking. I'll say one more time, the full extent, what ordinary people, what you and even I at times have used synonymous like consciousness, human awareness and all that. This, trust me, I'm trying to take you to a more pristine area. But think about that. Planning and time. Now I'm not sure what to tell you anymore. Think about them all three as the same thing? No. Think about them all three as almost the same thing? No. Think about all three of them as being completely different. Just a second. And now think about everything that's different as being absolutely the same and it's just an illusion. No. All right, think about all three of them individually containing the other two. No. All right, do the best you can. That's it. Do the best you can. All right. Well, that's not really enough. Let's put in the partnership. Now, everything I said about the three, put that one in and consider it so I don't have to go back through that. Okay? Now, either individually, collectively, or collectively divided by 4, or collectively times 3 divided by 3, or just you're on your own. But it's all of that I'm talking about. What if I suggested to you that all of that is to keep things from running together? Things. All right? Everything. Because each and every one of those keeps something from running together. You can look at each one of those as being like a coupling unit between two boxcars. You can, no matter how you try to wiggle out, if you can hear me at all and see this, each one of those serves a specific purpose of separation between two stuffs, two things, two everythings. And each one of them, of course, maybe I shouldn't have put that last one in. That's why I didn't start it out. Maybe I shouldn't have put that in. Maybe I should tell you that, no, I didn't mean to put that in. Maybe I should tell you that. I'll leave it to you to decide. I don't want to go back and mark it out. It's too far over there. But maybe I shouldn't have put that one in, now that I think about it. But the first three, obviously, keeps certain areas of life from running the hell together. Just, there's no doubt. If you can't see that, then I'll have to see this. You can't see that. What if the last one, what if I did not put that up by accident? And what if I hadn't said that maybe I shouldn't have put it up? What if I suggested to you that in a particular way, not psychologically, not metaphysically, not metaphorically, what if that last one, the P-ship, was for the purpose of keeping you from running together? What if what I mean by running together would be a dilution of a state of present complexity? What if a running together, what I mean by that, would lower your abilities to that of a chimpanzee, of a dog? And what if I insist to you again, I'm talking about something quite physical. Quite physical. It's not spiritual. It's not psychological. It's nervous system. And the basis of it's been known a long time. They just don't know what to make of it. They've made all they can of it, and it's just, and it's in you. And it's all tied to every one of those plans, thinking, time, and maybe the last one. Maybe I didn't make a mistake. Maybe I didn't mean it when I said that maybe I'll go over there and mark that one out. We'll have to turn the tape over. Can I have a little more? About a half. I'll stall if you'll hurry. All right, let's apparently change the subject. Play Mr. Rogers in the pretend playhouse or the imaginary part of the show. That sounds strange now I think about it. If you ever seen Mr. Rogers, him to call one part of it pretend or imagine. Never mind. No. From a more complex view, be beyond the realm of old ordinary thinking, but from a more complex view, everything that seems to be human problems by any definition at any time can be seen to be really a question of logistics, no matter what it is. Did I say I was changing the subject? I shouldn't keep saying that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the same thing that's right over here. But let's pretend for a second, like Mr. Rogers. It's all logistics. Anything that seems to be a human problem you can see if you can get away from old intelligence, and I believe I can at least make a few of you see one or two examples. One of them I brought up recently. By all accounts, and in the city, some of this information you can go by, because it doesn't matter if it's true or not, but you can go by it. The problem of human hunger, by all reports, and I have no doubt, I could have guessed this anyway, it is not a problem of there not being enough food on this planet at any given moment, over a long period of time. The problem is getting it from places of plenty to places of hunger. Simply a fact. Now get outside what would appear to be a rather, or a strictly physical level. You go into the areas of knowledge. If anybody has a problem with that, if that sounds too slippery, how about technology? But knowledge is thinking. What appears to be the processes of thinking. It is a matter of moving that from areas advanced to locales that are less developed. And by the way, any of you who are good, you could see that insofar as city affairs are worth thinking about, that is tied directly to the more basic, such more basic problems as hunger, the movements of food. Because they would say, somebody in the city, they would say in defense of, or in explanation of the fact that there's food enough to feed everybody all the time on the planet. The problem is getting it from one place to the other. And they could say, well, part of the problem is we do not have the technology to do it. We do not have the knowledge of how to move all this stuff around. Maybe we will tomorrow. Maybe when we feed all the information into computers and blah, blah, blah. Do I have to make up any more examples? Or all of you stuck enough to old intelligence that you think, well, all right, at least the hunger thing might be true, but what the hell does that have to do with being alive? Were it not for what I'm telling you is one problem, just from one view, I could call it other things, of course, is logistics. That all human problems are actually a problem of logistics. If that were not so, I must point out to you again that everything would run together. Such as all the people who are, let's consider this problem, human hunger, which I'm not making light of. But the problem of human hunger, then all the people that are hungry, and then all the food that is in surplus in other areas, it would all run together. You see what I mean? You see what the problem would be? There would no longer be a problem of human hunger. And those of you who are getting good, you understand that we're not talking about a human problem. We're not even talking about a cellular problem. We're talking about the current status of life. Inside of life are such things as, well, for instance, one comes to mind. Within the body of life, within the existence of life, is a thing known as the problem of human hunger. It's there. It is a fact. But insofar as looking at it as a problem, that this is a problem, and then over here we have other problems. We have problems of the backward nature of third world areas, the lack of technology, bringing them into the 20th century. Plus we still have the problems of people wanting to engage in bloody warfare over such trifling matters as their national borders. But all of that is a part of the thinking of life. It's not a problem of man. If indeed it was a problem, I'll go ahead and use the term for a second. For those of you that want other possibilities, verbally for a second, it's a problem of nature. It's a problem of the planet Earth. It's a problem of the universe. But it's not a human problem. As witnessed by the great one, the great sayings of, listen, men created this problem, men can solve it. If you understood there is life, is another one I suggest to you, that men take that so seriously They're just like being angry. If you get too serious, you can't tell a put on. And that's one of the last great ones, is having men here and there say, wait a minute, wars are not inevitable because humans cause wars. Yeah, humans can stop wars. And many people go, my God, I never thought about it that way, but that's about it. It's not it. But it sounds, what can you do? There is no rational, there is no humane, there is no thinking defense against that. There is no rebuttal other than to realize that, well, the whole thing's fallacious. Men don't start men don't start wars. But if you get that good, then you begin to get good. Because you realize, all right, at that level, that's true. Which is why the truth is irrelevant. That at that level, for somebody to say, all right, men cause pollution. You see this pollution in our rivers? Go right upstream to that plant. Men in that plant created those chemicals, had that waste. Men dumped that stuff in this river. All right? Men caused pollution, wars, hunger. Men caused it. Men can cure it. That's as true as rain. That's as true as ugly. Except it's not correct. Men do not cause pollution. If there is pollution. Life causes pollution. But do you realize all of these problems would run together? It would be like a nice Dufay watercolor, or anybody, that suddenly it rains on it. And the problems, the separation between the problem over here and the possible solution, the two conflicting parties, the two conflicting ideas, the two situations in life that seem to cause the problem. People over here have too much, people over here don't have enough. And it rains on it. And it begins to run together. Now, if there were ordinary people hearing this, it could sound everything from silly to heartless, or I guess just silly. Because you'd think, well, that's the whole thing about life. We're trying to get rid of problems. Now, you can say that. But life is letting you now open your mouth and decide what is a problem to life. I'm putting out to you, it is a manifestation of life. And if life wanted to be rid of the problem, life would be rid of the problem. If for nothing else, life can get rid of the so-called problem of human hunger, because all life's got to do is go burp and wipe out all of mankind. Then you got no human problem at all. If that is indeed a problem. So what I want you to see is the very situations that constitute the structure of human existence would begin to fade if you did away with the, quote, problems. They are logistical. I'm not saying they can be solved. I'm not saying they're going to be solved, because I'm not saying they're a problem. I admit that they're a so-called problem. And I understand, and you do too, why they would be called a problem. But only old ordinary intelligence looks at them as a problem caused by men that men must solve. May I remind you again, these three, and maybe all four of them, can be looked at as dividers, couplers. They keep specific things from running together. And if things run together just like a watercolor rained on, you cannot differentiate anymore between what the painting represented. What appears to be reality to human thinking will become a blur. Individuals will become a blur. I asked you earlier, could any of you even suspect the possibility that the partnership, the feeling that I am at least two entities in me, just in general, that without that, is it possible that you would run together? And a handful of you laughed and sniggered. But what if you did run together? There would be no sense of any individuality. You would simply be a dot on a full organism of ants on an anthill. That you, rather than being in any way an individual, with any sensation of an individual, you would be as ants or bees, I can suggest in a certain way, that individually they're almost nothing. You have to look at them, at the whole colony, the whole troop is almost a living organism, and they're all working towards some common end. To look at one ant by himself, you can't make any sense out of it. But then you get the hundreds of thousands together and them working. Now, I'm not even going to encourage any of you to consider the possibility that human life could be anything resembling that. But I am asking you, can you see the possibility that what seems to be that partnership arrangement, that there seems to be in everyone a dichotomy of some kind, a good you and a bad you, a happy you and a sad you, an enthusiastic you and a laid back, a lazy you, all of those. What if that was for a specific reason to keep two aspects from running together? And I'll repeat again, if I didn't make it clear enough, I was using these little tropic pictures like the watercolor, but what if that kind of running together, whatever it is I mean by that, if it was running together, it would be the destruction of certain functions. It would be their annihilation. It would be a lowering of the present level of complexity if certain things ran together. But certain things that are looked at by human thinking as being problems, difficulties, such as I pointed out, that it would look at pollution or hunger, that all right, if we could in some way make them run together to where it solved the problem, we'd certainly want to do so because we want it to go away. You don't know that. You don't know that. You don't know anymore at the ordinary thinking level that what you call your individual problems are the psychological problems of all people, but your problems, your fears, your unfulfilled dreams, your regrets, that if they were wiped out and you had no other recourse, that you weren't in some way involved with it like doing this at the same time, but if I just, or you just, or somebody just wiped away these problems and ran these dichotomies, these opposing feelings, these opposing thoughts, these plans that you've had that weren't fulfilled, these plans that you had that you ran amok with, that if you ran them all together, put them through the grinder to where they went away, you do not know that you'd be better off. You do not know that. Now, I am aware, I am conscious of the fact that everyone is wired up to believe that, well, I'd be much better. Why have I spent all these thousands of dollars in analysis? Why do I read books on psychology and self-help? I am trying to rectify these internal squabbles that I've had. I understand all that. I know that. But you do not know for a fact that if they could be accomplished, which you notice they can't be, not at the ordinary level, you wouldn't be here. They can't be. You should know that by now. But if they were, you do not know for a fact that you would be better off. Your thinking tells you it would. Everybody's thinking tells them it would. I can't resist. I've tried this once or twice in the last couple of weeks. Just sort of hit and run, but as long as we're out playing around in dangerous areas like the roundhouses and places where switching trains and you can easily get your foot caught down in there. Any of you who've seen good old D.W. Griffith movies, get your foot caught in there and boy, here comes a train every time and you're in for trouble. So as long as we're there dangerously, I'm gonna hit it a side glance at least one more time. The logistics, where I started my faux change of subject paragraph of me saying that all human problems, without exception, this kind of thing you can do on your own if you want to go back and check, but everything is considered to be a human problem of any kind, can be seen as being a logistical problem. That whatever it is seems to be the problem, the answer, the solution, the correction for it exists, but it's not in the right place. It's just not in the right place. And it's not just hunger. How about from one view, from one city view, a less complex view? Groups of people, cellular structures within the body of life itself, hollering out, we've got madmen at the controls and their fingers on all these weapons that could destroy the planet. That is. And let's just take this at the surface, at the descriptions, that all right, we have throughout the planet different areas, that is, different countries, we have their own nationalistic versions of Dr. Strangeloves. These partially deranged people, anything might set them off and they could blow up the planet. We got those people. But then we've got these other people that are sane enough to recognize that. They're the ones out writing articles, or maybe even out in the street demonstrating, ban the bombs, do away with, a whirlwind government, those kind of people. Now just take it for a second. This had nothing to do with politics, of course. Let's assume this second group correctly understand that this other group of people are the problem. We've got nuts. We've got still warmongers. We've got people with old consciousness. We've got holdovers from other ages, the Cold War eras. They're still in control in places, and they're the ones that could destroy the planet, because we've got a whole new group of people here in the 1980s and 90s coming up that we know better. We're not so driven by those primitive nationalistic drives. And so if we had more people like us in charge, there would be no chance, or minimal chance, nothing like the chance we got now of these old Cold Warriors with their fingers on the buttons. All right, let's say they're correct. It sounds correct. We're peace-loving. We wouldn't go to war. All right, you see the solution. Assume it is a problem. We got nuts, deranged people, men who may cause wars. We got them over here, and they got their fingers on the button, and we got these other people over here who know it, and say we got to get rid of them. Do you see the solution? If that is a problem over here, the solution's here. These people. But they're just in the wrong place. All we got to do is take these people off the streets and from writing articles and move them and put them in charge of the button. So you see, the solution is there. The solution is always there. The answer is always there. It's not just the problem of moving food from a place of plenty to a place of hunger. I told you, it's all human problems can be seen as a matter of logistics. Now the area I said I was going to give one more passing blow to, think about this individually. Of being able to move knowledge, something, some kind of electrical, chemical activity in you, in a place that may be of plenty to a place that is perhaps not quite as fertile. Being able to move what people would think of as being knowledge, even experience. For those of you that still like the idea that, well, you can learn from your experience, all right. I point out at city level that's not true, but just because that's correct at city level doesn't mean it's not correct at some other level. So why don't people learn from their experience? That's a problem, isn't it? Okay. What did I just tell you tonight that all problems could be seen as? Logistics. I suggest to you that why people cannot learn from their experience is they can't take the experience, this so-called potential lesson, they can't move it from where it is to where it needs to be. That the knowledge, the so-called knowledge you already have, that is certain activities, certain thinking activities, that is certain biochemical activities of your nervous system that takes place in the brain. There are certain things there that you think of as knowledge, things I know, things I forget, things I suspect. You cannot move them from a place where they are now, which they may be plentiful. If they're there, they're plentiful. If it's just one. The problem is you can't get it from there to where it's needed. Oh, I was going to make this, remember, a suggestion, a question. Can any of you consider that? Did any of you pay any attention? I got some laughs, that kind of not before laugh. Let me point out, we're asking you the possibility that everything is simply one thing. Like all human thoughts is actually one thought. That there was only one book, there's only one word ever been said, only one thought ever been thought, only one thing's ever happened. And since then, it's all been a rehashing of that. of somebody criticizing that, and then it just grows exponentially out. People, like, it just builds upon that. Remember? Think about that in relationship to what I just pointed out. It's always a problem of logistics, because you're having to keep moving around. In a sense, it's like a phony baloney army. It's like a version, I guess, of a Potemkin village army, that they're all false fronts, and you've got to keep moving them around. It's like, well, I'm being attacked, but it's just these outlines. It's the cardboard outlines of this tank over here. And it's not really anybody else pushing the tank close to you. If you could see it, it's like yourself. And it's pushing the tank closer, and then you've got one that's like a bigger tank, or perhaps a big airplane. And you're behind it, and you shift it around. And it's you and everybody else shifting these things around, trying to straighten out the balance of power, trying to rectify problems, trying to come to some kind of grips with fights over territorial limits and borders, things that separate. Oh, I just, sounds familiar somewhere. But that all this is going on, and in a sense, it is like a charade to keep people from realizing that all of this could run together, and if it did, we'd come up with one thing. One little run-together picture, one painting, one thought, one book, one thing happened. One burst of energy, and the rest of this is they keep painting over the same place over and over. Everybody keeps painting over it, except painting over it, of course, is metaphorical in this sense. Everybody keeps thinking over it over and over, as they're supposed to, because at city level this is built up. Increased complexity. Never enough to satisfy a few people in their lifetime, because the complexity of the city at its zenith at any given time is not enough to give you, assuming you belong here, what you want. It is simply not there. Oh, all right. What if it's there and it's in the wrong place? There, I said it. There, I said it, and I'm almost glad. Well, if there is a partnership in each person, which all of you by now has agreed to, which doesn't take a lot to agree to it, in the city, you know, they have ideas of conscious mind, unconscious mind. But if that's true, at the individual level, now you've got to be able to take that great quantum leap right quick and consider the possibility, that it's true for the organism of humanity, that the whole smear and spectrum and dynamic of human life is a partnership. That means within the full totality of human existence, there is some stuff in one place that were it to be moved, the logistical problem, to another place, human existence would take on a complete different complexion. The hungry would be fed. Those with grain rotting would now have money, would have more space to raise more grain. Those who have more technology, they got a whole back room full of computers, that everybody now in the country has 3 computers. How are we going to get them to those poor people in Albania who are dying for computers? How are we going to get the knowledge that some of us have got over here to all these people over there? And of course people over there, how are they going to get their knowledge over here? That doesn't sound familiar at all? That doesn't sound like just a rough description of life, the struggle of life, the struggle of humanity to climb up the hill of progress, the continuing dancing about, the fits and starts of human evolution, social progress? That doesn't sound at all familiar. How could there be progress were it not for a split? How could there be any success if everything was spread out? If food was equally spread out, if information was equally divided, if there were no frontiers, not between countries, between people, all right, not between people, between you, not between you inside. What if there was no partnership? Can anybody run back up this list backwards? if there were no partnership, there'd be no time. If there were no partnership, you could not plan. If there were no partnership, you couldn't think. Because there were no partnership, where I started off, you could not talk to yourself. Who would you have to talk to? I think I will stop and remind you that I have been real close for the last 2 nights to telling you something that's real close to telling you something. And I've just been real close right now. I'm talking about something real close. Something just, to some of you, that if I could describe it to you and tell you about it without describing it to you and actually telling you about it, was part of my rhetorical question the night before last. Are you sure that all of you would like to hear the blood and guts basis of all of this? I don't mean all of this or what I'm doing, but all of this. But what life's doing and what brought this kind of thing on. That if there was such a blood and gut sentence that just didn't take into account at all, no relationship, no references to the human spirit, the human mind, society, culture, art, that it just could describe to you, turn the camera back, on whatever possible combination, separation, any connection that these might have, that there is a blood and guts answer to it. It's right in your nervous system. But who would want to give up the thrill of the chase? Oh, you mean the thrill of trying to get from here to over there? Well, yeah, or at least to move some of this stuff from here over there. Of course, Kyroot pointed out about that one guy that seemed to have had some revolutionary interest at one time that surmised, opined, that a real revolutionist probably shouldn't have anything more than he could load up in one car trip and take with him. Now that's getting the logistical problem, if it is indeed a problem, and if it does exist, that's getting it down, I would say, to almost a manageable level, would you not? At least in relationship to having to call in 2 Mayflower trucks. What if you looked at your moving problem as being your problem of ignorance? Your problem of still being a medium for fears and rejection and regrets and unfulfilled dreams. What if that was some of your possessions, some of your baggage, and if indeed all problems are, as I suggest to you, could be seen as being logistical, would it not seem at least perhaps appropriate, potentially beneficial, to have as little baggage, to have to move through this logistical problem area as possible? Just a thought. But a darn good one, I would say. I am perhaps biased. I am perhaps biased in saying perhaps. Perhaps. Oh, I will stop by asking you again, do you think after hearing this tonight, maybe I'll abandon this by next time we meet? Because I've never done it 2 nights in a row. That's so hard. But I ask you again, the kind of movement, the kind of movement I'm referring to that would be the solution, if one were needed, of the logistical problems, which I suggested you, is a better description of all human problems. Would that movement of stuff from one place to another that would apparently cure the problem, should that kind of movement include me thinking what thinking is? Should I do that? Should I tell thinking what its purpose is? Should I tell thinking what its actual physical basis is? Which would, if you heard it, and I'm suggesting I can almost assure that some of you would hear it, that you suddenly saw what you are. Not you individually, because you're nothing individually. But you would see what humans are, and you would see what human thinking is. Is that kind of movement called for? Is that kind of movement necessary? Is that kind of movement possible? Should I be a party to it? Well, I will give you something to think about.